Welcome. Thanks for giving up some time on a Wednesday evening to join the Old Pros for an evening that's going to be a treat. Not just the treat you have in front of you, but the presentation that we have for you tonight. Before we present this evening program, we have a bit of business to take care of. Our show this evening is Shakespeare's Women, an evening with Julia Lupton and Ava Burton. Okay, and so welcome them, and we'll get to them in just a moment. Part of our November meeting next month is devoted to finding a board of directors. Fortunately, we have a slate. Yay, always important, okay? I'm happy to present to you our slate. However, if you have someone that you would like to put in nomination, please do that. You can text me, I'll give you my phone number, it's available, or you can email me, or you can email Carol, okay? That being said, here's the slate. Carol Glenn has graciously offered again to serve as president. Thank you, Carol. And Michael Pontecovo has graciously agreed to be our vice president. Thank you, Michael. Secretary Lee McMorris. Lee, was she in here yet? She was outside taking care of business. Thank you. And a rather new member of the Old Pros for treasurer, Linda Lawson. Linda, put your hand up. Thank you. That being said, we would like to share that we would welcome anybody, invite anybody who has a love for theater to join the Old Pros, okay? Welcome, welcome, welcome again. You could even define the position that you want on the board. How's that for an offer, okay? You could be Program Research Committee Chair. Wow. What are we going to do in March next year? Oh, I have an idea, okay? Sitting there, maybe you've thought sometimes when you've seen a show that, oh, I would like to see the Old Pros do thus and such. Or maybe you've sat there and said, I think the Old Pros should do thus and such, and I can do that. So keep that in mind also, okay? Also at our November meeting, we have a cornucopia of talent. We are nowhere close to Thanksgiving, very close to Thanksgiving, all right? We're not sure what kind of turnout we're going to have, but we do have a cornucopia of treasures for you to enjoy. If you have family in for the weekend, okay, or if you have someone, you know, a friend that you would like to bring to the Old Pros, please come as our guest at November meeting, okay? No charge, no $5, just come and enjoy our bits and pieces cornucopia for November, okay? Now to our October program, for which you have all come tonight. We're in for a special treat, a presentation of Shakespeare's most outspoken women. You think Shakespeare had outspoken women way back then? Oh yeah, there were still outspoken women. Maybe it's taken a long time for us to listen to them, but they're certainly in Shakespeare's place. For example, Isabella in Measure for Measure, Amelia in Othello, and we have Amelia here that we did a long time ago, remember? And we have, of course, Desdemona dressed up, all right? And Lady Macbeth from the, oh, it's all right, it's okay to say Lady Macbeth, but not the play. We're going to call that the Scottish play. I always like to call it the Scotch play because I like to imbibe my own Scotch when I was watching that. Professor Julia Lupton, who is in the front here, and I will soon turn over the mic to her, will share insights into the plays and their themes of female agency, protest, and power. Actor Ava Burton will perform monologues that bring these women to life. Thank you both for coming. Julia is a distinguished professor of English at UCI Irvine and a co-coordinator of the New Swan Shakespeare Center. Sounds ambitious to me. She's the author or co-author of 5 books on Shakespeare and a former Guggenheim Fellow. She's a frequent teacher in our community. So as I've gone around to greet you this evening, I've heard many of you say, oh yeah, I know her. Yeah, she's been around. Yeah, I've heard her before. Okay, but you're going to hear her again tonight. Okay, Ava Burton is a graduate of the East 15 Acting School in London and the University of Essex. You may note an accent. She's from Leeds. An experienced actor and scholar of Shakespearean characters. Ava is also associate producer with California presenting company Laguna Beach Live. Among Ava's many projects, she's the co-director and performer of Shakespeare's Fools, a show of speeches and songs from plays. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you Shakespeare's Women, An Evening with Julia Lupton, and Ava Burton. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Carol, and thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. I have been coming to Laguna Woods for a really long time, and I've had the pleasure of learning with many of you here. So I'm going to be kind of lecturing, and Ava's going to be definitely performing, and I hope we'll have some time for some conversation as well. So what we're going to do, the title of this is Shakespeare's Women After 1600. I realized that the women that, when I started working on the PowerPoint a couple of weeks ago, I realized that the women that I selected for tonight are not these women. These are the women from before, more or less from before 1600, during the reign of Queen Elizabeth. And they include Juliet, and all of the women in A Midsummer Night's Dream, Portia, Rosalind, Viola, Olivia, and Beatrice from Much Ado About Nothing. And they are, some of their characteristics are that they're feisty, that they're resilient, that they're witty, that they're amorous. They tend to be on the younger side, they're lyrical, and they're fun. And it's not that they don't have depth, because many of these women have complex backstories that make them full of resonance and attraction to us over the centuries. But Shakespeare's heroines after 1600 are a little bit different, and they're the ones that we're going to be featuring today. Queen Elizabeth is dead. King James the Sixth of Scotland, the First of England, is the king. Shakespeare himself is a little bit older, perhaps a little bit wiser. His women become more complex. They become more layered, they become darker, and some of them are more mature. He still has lots of young women in his plays, but he also gives space to some older women who have a bit more history to them. And so we're going to look at some of these women tonight. Measure for Measure stars a very young woman named Isabella, who is an intellectual and lives in a corrupt and problematic city and has a very difficult decision to make. Not one that necessarily makes her sympathetic, but one that bespeaks to her principles and her desire to control her own life, no matter what the cost. We're going to talk about Amelia in Shakespeare's Othello. She is the battered wife of Iago and the maidservant and friend of Desdemona. And she has some very, very powerful speeches that have made her a very memorable Best Supporting Actress in this play. Lady Macbeth requires very little introduction. And then we're going to end with Cleopatra, who I think is one of Shakespeare's most interesting and complete heroines on the stage, with quite a long history, both a real history in the historical record and a kind of complicated backstory that Shakespeare gives her in his play. So We're going to be moving through these women, and I'll talk a little bit about their background, and Ava will be performing a speech from each of them. So does that sound like a good way to spend the night, Wednesday night? And we're not going to talk about Helena and All's Well, but I wanted to complete my honeycomb diagram there. And we will be producing All's Well That Ends Well at New Swan this coming summer. So hopefully you'll have a chance to either come out and see our production or invite me back to do some learning and teaching around it, because it's a quite interesting play. So these women, I'll skip it. You saw a summary there. Okay, so we're going to start with Isabella from Measure for Measure. How many of you have read or seen Measure for Measure? So some of you have. And how many of you saw it performed at New Swan this summer? A few of you, good. Okay, so I've already been asked about the ending, and so we might have a chance to discuss that after we talk about the play a little bit more. It's not the most famous or popular of Shakespeare's plays. It's sometimes called a problem comedy because none of the characters is especially lovable. Some of them are admirable, and I think Isabella is an admirable character. But she's not Rosalind, she's not Juliet, she's not full of a kind of joie de vivre. She has a tough quality to her, and she has grown up in a tough city. And certainly in our production, we really emphasized that Vienna is a place where it's not safe to be a woman. There's a lot of venereal disease, there's a lot of sexual assault, there's a lot of discrimination, women are passed over for good jobs, there's a lot of sex trafficking without a lot of protections for the women who are involved in the sex trade. So it's a tough environment. And in our production this summer, our director, Beth Lopes, really saw Isabella as entering a nunnery to get away from all that. Yes, she has a vocation. Yes, she believes in what she's doing, but she's also looking for a way out of the situation where there's very few good roles, good pathways for women in the Vienna that takes place in Vienna that's depicted in Shakespeare's play. And so she is on a path to becoming a nun. She's a novitiate, so she has not yet taken her orders, but she's she's just getting ready to take her vows and never see another man again, basically. But she's pulled out of this path because her brother, Claudio, has been arrested for fornication. He's made his girlfriend pregnant. And so she goes before the young magistrate, Angelo, to plea for her brother's life. He's going to actually be executed for this fornication. So the play has a lot of big ideas. Not all of Shakespeare's plays are philosophical, but this one is. And some of the ideas are justice versus mercy, which we also see in The Merchant of Venice, which is written a few years earlier. We have the theme of respect versus love. It's not really a romantic play. There are marriages at the end, but they are largely coerced. They're not chosen, they're not especially happy, except for possibly Claudio, the brother, and Juliet, his bride. But these marriages all have a kind of a pragmatic and even coercive element to them. But there is respect. There is respect, I think, that is earned over the course of the play, at least among some of these characters. And the word respect occurs at various points in the drama. And it's a play about chastity. She values her chastity. But is her chastity an end, or is it a way of preserving her agency, her self-determination over her body and her future? And certainly in our production, we emphasize the agency element. Chastity can look like a very old-fashioned virtue, but agency, which is the core of personhood, is a very modern idea, and one that Isabella is wed to, that Isabella is committed to. And then finally, this theme of public health. You don't think about Shakespeare as like a professor of public health. We have a whole school of public health at UC Irvine. But the question of what you do with transmittable diseases, what you do with sexuality, how you regulate sexuality in relationship to larger public health issues, these are things which this play is very much about. And we could talk more about that if we had time. So here's our character, Isabella, from our production. These are production shots from New Swan. So Isabella is a novitiate. She's principled. She feels very strongly about chastity and also about following the law and having an ordered and disciplined life for herself and for others. She's very unlike her brother. So I don't know if that makes her the big sister or the little sister, but there's definitely some birth order stuff going on here because Claudio is super relaxed, sleeps with his girlfriend, very casual guy, and his sister is pretty serious. So they're an interesting brother-sister pair. She's also an intellectual, and that's another reason maybe she's going into the nunnery. If she had been born in a different generation, she probably would have gone to law school, or maybe to medical school, or maybe to the College of Public Health. Might have gone into government. Maybe that's what she does at the end of the play. But those are not options for her in the world that Shakespeare is depicting. And so she enters the nunnery, which is a place where there would be some opportunity for study and education. And then she's not very romantic. We don't see her falling in love in this play. She doesn't have an especially romantic view of what's happening between Claudio and her sister-in-law, friend, common-law sister-in-law. So she's not someone who has been reading novels like Juliet. If she reads novels, she's skeptical of them. So I think that's really important. And then Angelo, he's actually a lot like her, isn't he? He's an untested leader. He's been asked to run the city while the Duke goes on vacation. So he's at the beginning of a career, just like she's at the beginning of becoming a nun. We have these two young people who are starting out and who are untested, whose principles and values have not yet been tested in the school of life. And he is also very principled. His job is to enforce the law. It was his idea to throw Claudio in prison and order his execution for fornication. So he's taking the law to kind of an extreme place. There were no laws like that in Shakespeare's England, so this is kind of fairy tale law, but it sets up interesting dilemmas in the world that Shakespeare is creating in this play. He's also an intellectual. He really likes talking to Isabella about the law. They would have been good law school buddies if they had been born at a different time. And he's also not very romantic. When he becomes attracted to Isabella, it's sexual. He doesn't idealize her. He doesn't imagine marrying her. He doesn't put her on a pedestal. He wants to put her on her back. He wants to thrust her against the wall, like the Capulet boys want to thrust the Montague girls against the wall at the beginning of Romeo and Juliet. So he's, and if this had been written during the reign of Queen Elizabeth, it would be a different play. Right? This would be Beatrice and Benedict, who are also intellectuals, who are also principled, who are also unromantic and pragmatic, not interested in marriage. But this is not an Elizabethan play, this is a Jacobean play. And rather than having these two mutually transform each other, let's say like in the new comedy, No One Wants You, Nobody Wants You, these are two people who push each other further towards the extreme. And when Isabella comes to make her argument before Angelo the magistrate, he not only is not persuaded by her arguments, but wants to sleep with her. And he makes a very terrible proposition to her. He says, if you sleep with me, I will spare your brother's life. And she is, so much for principles. And she is furious, and she says, I'm going to proclaim you in the streets. You are such a hypocrite, and no way I'm going to sleep with you, slime bag. And he's like, in our production, he's really scared of this. He's like, oh my God, she's going to proclaim me. And he sits down at his desk. We have this great desk on stage, and he's getting ready to sign the stay of execution papers. And then he stops. And he says, who will believe you, Isabel? You're just a girl. And I'm a magistrate. And I'm admired for my sexual chastity and my rigorous approach to the law. No one's going to think that this is true. They're going to think you made it up in order to free your scumbag brother from prison. So she's in a real bind. What is she going to do? Is she going to sleep with the guy? What will happen? And so this is what we're going to hear. This is her famous monologue. And it begins, to whom should I complain? And we're going to have wonderful Ava perform this for us.
To whom should I complain? Did I tell this? Who would believe me? Oh, perilous mouths that bear in them one and the self-same tongue, either of condemnation or reproof, bidding the law make curtsy to their will, hooking both right and wrong to the appetite to follow as it draws. Oh, to my brother. And though he hath fallen by prompture of the blood, yet hath he in him such a mind of honour that had he 20 heads to tender down on 20 bloody blocks, he'd yield them up before his sister should her body stoop to such abhorred pollution. Then Isabel, live chaste, and brother die. More than our brother is our chastity. I will go tell him yet of Angelo's request, and fit his mind to death for his soul's rest.
Thank you, Ava. That was fantastic. Beautiful. So this is the speech that you just heard. To whom should I complain? She understands. Can you hear better? Sorry.
Much better, thanks.
Sorry about that. Wow. To whom should I complain? Will she be heard? And so then that's the first part of the speech. I'll to my brother. She decides, well, he's such a good guy and he loves me so much. He would never expect me to do this. And then sort of her conclusion, then Isabel live chaste and brother die. More than our brother is our chastity. So it's a very powerful, difficult moment. When I teach this to our freshmen, many of them don't understand her choice. It's like her brother versus her chastity. Like life and death versus sex. But she's really in a dilemma here. And in our production, our director changed that word chastity to agency, more than our brother is our agency, in order to emphasize the high stakes of this decision for her. So I know some of you saw our production, and in the Q&A we can maybe discuss some of the other choices that our director made. So that's Isabella. Let us talk about Amelia. So probably everyone here has seen or read or knows the story of Othello, right? Good, this is one of the famous ones that we're talking about today. Amelia might not be the character that pops out in your memory, though, of the play. She is the wife of Iago, and in many productions, especially contemporary productions, she is shown as being kind of abused by him. Certainly psychologically abused, and sometimes physically abused by him as well. And that's important because Amelia makes a very bad decision in this play, which is what?
The handkerchief.
The handkerchief, right. She picks up the handkerchief when Desdemona drops it and gives it to her husband. And when Desdemona is distraught and asks Amelia, have you seen it? She says, no, I haven't seen it. So this is a kind of a turning point for Amelia's character, is this decision to kind of choose her husband over Desdemona, and also to choose a lie over truth. And if we see her as a battered and abused wife, it doesn't excuse that decision, but it certainly explains it. That she's terrified of him, and that she's also very hungry for his affection and his approval. She wants to maintain whatever she can of this marriage, and the handkerchief is her mechanism for doing that. She's pragmatic and unromantic, in a different way, I think, from Isabella. But she is one of these women who is not romanced by romance. She's been in this marriage for a long time. Maybe she thought he was hot 20 years ago, but now he's just hot-tempered and has to be managed and avoided. So she has a very pragmatic and realistic view of male and female relationships, quite different from Desdemona. And so they're foils. And we often see this in Shakespeare, where there'll be a romantic like Romeo and a realist like Mercutio. And here we have that pairing in these two female characters. And so there's a wonderful scene in which Desdemona is dressing for bed. Othello has been very cruel to her in public, and he tells her to get dressed and to prepare for, marital duties. And she has a sense of foreboding about this. He's, of course, planning to smother her in their marriage bed. And as they get dressed for bed, Amelia and Desdemona have a very intense conversation about marriage. And in many contemporary castings of the play, Amelia is not white, which of course adds a layer of complexity in terms of the different couples that are featured in the drama. At New Swan this summer, we did a 4-part version of Othello as a dramatic reading with just the two couples. And that was, we called it Cyprus, and it really kind of brought into focus the interrelationship of these two couples across race and gender and also class lines. And this is not the first time that the play has been reduced to a kind of chamber drama. There's a wonderful ballet called The Moor's Pavane by a wonderful Mexican choreographer, Jose Limon, which creates a kind of courtly dance. A pavane is a kind of a courtly dance from the 16th and 17th century between these two couples. that begins as a kind of orderly dance, and then it becomes a narrative of destruction and jealousy and eventually death. And so our dramatic reading is sort of in that tradition. This amazing scene, this amazing intimate scene, how do I go forward here? Yep, there we go. It's a scene between two women, and it has a kind of an intimacy and realism and modernism to it. But Shakespeare is really drawing on a lot of iconography, a lot of imagery of women getting ready for the sexual act, women getting ready to go to bed, in both senses of the term, going to bed. And so I'm just going to show you a couple of these images. This one, for example, is a woman at her toilet meaning her dressing table, her vanity, and it's also called Lady World. The idea is that if a woman is taking care of her looks, she's probably up to no good. So Lady World means like the lady is a tramp, okay? This one is Bathsheba at her bath. So this was a very popular subject in 16th and 17th century paintings, and Bathsheba will eventually, commit adultery with King David, and here she is at her moment of intimacy with her serving woman. This is a beautiful one by Rembrandt, and the serving woman is kind of in the dark there, washing her feet. And in this version of it from the 17th century, the serving woman is African. And so we do see a kind of racial marking of the servant and the lady in some of these paintings. And so that's kind of background for the kind of intimate work that these two are doing in Shakespeare's play. And after Desdemona sings her beautiful willow song, which we're not going to have Ava do, you're safe, they engage in a kind of a philosophical dialogue. And the question that Desdemona praises is, would any woman really step out on her man? I wouldn't do that for all the world. And Amelia's like, for all the world? The world's a big thing. So we're going to hear that kind of pragmatic approach in Amelia's response to Desdemona's idealistic view and romantic view of marriage, an idealistic view that's going to basically kill her in the next hour of her life.
Why? Would not you? Nor I neither by this heavenly light. I might do it as well in the dark. The world's a huge thing. It's a great price for a small vice. In truth, I think I should, and undo it when I had done. Marry, I would not do such a thing for a joint ring, nor for measures of lawn, nor for gowns, petticoats, nor caps, nor any petty exhibition. But for the whole world? Why? Who would not make her husband a cuckold to make... Who would not make her husband a cuckold to make him a monarch? I should venture purgatory for it. Why, the wrong is but a wrong in the world. And having the world for your labour, 'tis but a wrong in your own world, and you might quickly make it right. But I do think it is their husbands' faults when wives do fall. See that they slack their duties and pour our treasures into foreign laps, or else break out in peevish jealousies and throw restraint upon us. See, they strike us or scant our former having in despite. Why? We have galls, and though we have some grace, yet we have some revenge. Let husbands know their wives have sense like them. They see and smell and have their palates both for sweet and sour like husbands have. What is it they do when they change us for others? Is it sport? I think it is. Doth affection breed it? I think it doth. Is frailty that thus errs? It is so too. And have we not affections, desires for sport and frailty like men have? Then let them treat us wisely, else let them know the ills we do, their ills instruct us so.
So Amelia is pretty incredible, right? Ava's pretty incredible. She's quite smart. She's not educated, but she's very sharp, and she really thinks through the problem. And it's quite interesting. And you might have noticed that there are actually some echoes here of another famous character, Shylock, in The Merchant of Venice. Amelia says, let husbands know their wives have sense like them. They see and smell and have their palates both for sweet and sour. And Shylock says, hath not a Jew hands, organs, dimensions, senses, affections, passions? And then she says, their ills instruct us so. And that's very much what Shylock's argument is, right? The Christians have taught me revenge, and I will deliver it back to them. So it's interesting to see Shakespeare thinking through questions of justice, questions of hypocrisy, questions of the double standard, and these two very different characters. And one in verse and one in prose, you might notice as well. But allowing Amelia to have some of the tragic stature and also some of the kind of deep intelligence and insight that Shylock also has in his play. Okay, so now we have Lady Macbeth. And she is quite a complicated character, right? She's a wife. She may be a mother. She has several, there's a famous question, how many children did Lady Macbeth have? She definitely has had children, but doesn't appear to have them now. And that creates various interesting questions for actors and directors. If you saw the film of a few years ago, which really emphasizes the toll of war on this family, it's clear that her son has been killed in war, and that their relationship, the Macbeth's relationship, has been kind of gone into a deep downward spiral because their son has been killed in military activities to which the husband is deeply committed. And sort of out of that loss and out of the rage that she feels in relationship to that loss, she becomes self-destructively ambitious. So that's a kind of one interesting interpretation of that question of her motherhood. She becomes a queen. She's, of course, very intelligent. Not sure I would necessarily call her an intellectual, but she's very intelligent. I would not call her a romantic, but she's very sexual, and we'll maybe see some of that, at least in the background of the imagery of her speech. She knows how to use sexuality with her husband, and not just to entice him, but also to shame him. I think it's sexuality as a weapon. And she's a little witchy. She clearly has some connections with those ladies on the heath. Romeo and Juliet is the birth of the rom-com, along with some of those other plays, As You Like It and Much Ado About Nothing. Macbeth is really the birth of Gothic horror and also serious TV. You'll see in many of your mafia stories, your crime stories, your heavy procedurals, that there's a Lady Macbeth. That there's some ambitious woman, often a wife, sometimes a mom, who is making the guys do bad things. And the paradigm for that is this play. This play made that character fascinating and eternally interesting to audiences. How to Break Bad. I don't know how many of you have seen the TV show Breaking Bad. Great TV. And here are some things, these are some points in terms of how Macbeth, who enters this play as a decent enough guy, right? A very good soldier, responsible to the chain of command, ambitious but not overwhelmingly so. How does he break bad? And these are some of the ways in which he breaks bad. And I'm going to just focus on the one in the center, which is that you need a helpmeet. You need a spur, a prompter, or a partner. Right? He says at one point in one of his famous early speeches, when he's still not quite sure if he's going to kill Duncan or not, he says, "I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent." Well, he does have a spur to prick the sides of my intent, and that is Lady Macbeth. And so we're going to hear her first entry onto stage. And she enters reading a letter from her husband.
They met me in the day of success, and I have learned by the perfectest report they have more in them than mortal knowledge. When I burned in desire to question them further, they made themselves air into which they vanished. Whilst I stood wrapped in the wonder of it, came missives from the king, who all hailed me Thane of Cawdor, by which title before these weird sisters saluted me, and referred me to the coming on of time with Hail King that shall be. This have I thought good to deliver thee, my dearest partner of greatness, that thou mightest not lose the dues of rejoicing by being ignorant of what greatness is promised thee. Lay it to thy heart, and farewell. Glamis thou art, and Cawdor, and shalt be what thou art promised. Yet do I fear thy nature. 'Tis too full of the milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way. Thou wouldst be great, art not without ambition, but without the illness should attend it. What thou wouldst highly, that wouldst thou holily, wouldst not play false, and yet would strongly win. Thou'dst have, great Glamis, that which cries, thus thou must do if thou have it, and that which thou dost rather fear to do than wishes should be undone. Hie thee hither, that I may pour my spirits in thine ear, and chastise with the valour of my tongue all that impedes thee from the golden round, which fate and metaphysical aid doth seem to have thee crowned withal. The king comes here tonight. The raven himself is hoarse that crows the fatal entrance of Duncan under my battlements. Come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here and fill me from the crown to the toe, top full of direst cruelty. Make thick my blood, stop up the passage and access to remorse, that no compunctious visitings of nature shake my fell purpose, nor make peace between the effect and it. Come to my woman's breast, and take my milk for gall, you murdering ministers, wherever in your sightless substances you wait on nature's mischief. Come, thick night, and pall thee in the dunnest smoke of hell, that my keen knife see not the wound it makes, nor heaven peep through the blanket of the dark to cry, hold, hold.
That was beautiful. Thank you. And a little scary.
Well, that's nearly Halloween.
So she comes entering, reading a letter from Macbeth, and this really interests me. And I love the way Ava did it, very modern, that she's getting this as a text message. I haven't seen it done that way yet in London, but I think you're going to make it happen. And the reason I think this is so interesting is that Macbeth is, ahead of Duncan arriving, is laying it all out for her, right? We said that he needs a helpmeet, he needs a prompter, he needs a spur to his intent. Well, he has to create that. He has to get her to get him to do it. And so he's kind of working her a bit, I think, in sending this letter. And she rises to the occasion because she knows that he may have too much of the milk of human kindness to do this on his own, and that she's going to really have to shame him and prod him and prick him to get him to, quote, screw his courage to the sticking place, as she puts it in a later scene. So I think that's a really important dimension here, is the way in which that she becomes the prompter, but he prompts her to become the prompter. He needs to get her to take that role. Does that happen in marriages? Right, you think that you're doing it out of your own free will, but you've actually been kind of pushed towards a position in order to persuade the other person to do something that they're not sure they want to do. So there's a lot of insight here, we see. I mean, obviously these are very large stakes, but we can see some of these techniques being something that Shakespeare must have observed in the world around him. And then this amazing speech that she gives is an example of her being witchy, right? Because she's really calling on the infernal powers to fill her with a kind of capacity for evil that she doesn't have on her own. So she is also trying to employ a helpmeet, a spur, a prompter, or a partner. In this case, it is these infernal spirits who we've also seen on the heath. And if we look at her, this is her scene of Breaking Bad. I have number 5 there. You need to learn how not to think. Or number 1, partition one's moral sense from one's physical actions. And we see this in the speech as well. Macbeth is very good at that, but Lady Macbeth is also good at it, right? She says, "Come thick night, and pall thee in the dunnest smoke of hell, that my keen knife see not the wound it makes," right? So she's saying, make it really dark, so that when I stabby stab stab, I don't see the knife go in. So that's kind of the literal meaning. But the moral, psychological meaning is, I need to divide my moral sense from my physical sense. I need to not see what I'm doing in order to do it. And this is something which the Macbeths become very, very good at as they move down through the path of crime, as they break bad together, prompting each other. And then that final one is have it in you, right? You've got to be the guy or the girl who can really be violent. And Macbeth doesn't have it in him without her. And she doesn't have it in her without calling on these kind of deeper forces in her and beyond her. So it's a quite wonderful speech. We could say more about it, but we have still Cleopatra. So we're going to go on to her. So Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, is our final amazing woman of the night. And I think she is, in some ways, Shakespeare's most complete portrait of absolute womanhood, if you will. Like Lady Macbeth, she's ambitious. After all, she's Queen of Egypt. Like Amelia, she is pragmatic and sharp-tongued. Like Isabella, she's an intellectual. After all, she had a really big library in Alexandria. But like Juliet and Rosalind, she's really in love. She's really in love with Antony. And so she's, in many ways, Shakespeare is, in the figure of Cleopatra, integrating those early romantic heroines with these later, darker and more pragmatic women. So I think she's his most complex portrait. She has a full life cycle: wife, widow, mistress, mother, and lover. So she's really had all these different relationships to a bunch of different guys. Even more than Macbeth, it's a play about marriage and divorce and widowhood. Integrating features of these earlier heroines with his later women. We also have that element of race that we saw around the edges of the character of Amelia. Shakespeare certainly saw Cleopatra as a black woman. The historical Cleopatra was most likely not, but Shakespeare understood her as an African queen. And this is also a history play. And what I think is important there is that he didn't just make her up. Cleopatra VII was an amazing woman. And there are some great recent biographies of her that I highly recommend to you. And so she's really a kind of a Cleopatra VII of Egypt, the last of the Ptolemies, is really a co-creator with Shakespeare of this character. He doesn't get all the credit for the woman that he presents on stage. So we're going to look now, this is our final monologue, at her death speech, and I'm just not even going to say anything.
Give me my robe. Put on my crown. I have immortal longings in me. Now, no more the juice of Egypt's grape shall moist this lip. Yar, yar, good Iris, quick. Methinks I hear Antony call. I see him rouse himself to praise my honourable act. I hear him mock the luck of Caesar, which the gods give men to excuse their afterwrath. Husband, I come now to that name, my courage prove my title. I am fire and air, my other elements I give to baser life. Come, thou mortal wretch, with thy sharp teeth, this knot intrinsicate of life, at once untie. Poor venomous fool, be angry and dispatch. Couldst thou speak, that I might hear them call great Caesar ass unpoliced? Peace, peace, dost thou not see? see my baby at my breast that sucks the nurse to sleep. Sweet as balm, soft as air, gentle. Oh, Anthony, what? Should I stay?
Stay there, Eva. Come back. Well, you were great.
Oh, thank you.